Sing your great Redeemer's praise, glorious in his works and ways." He was astounded. Her recollection of the air and words was the more wonderful, for he remembered now that he had only sung that particular hymn once. But to his still greater delight and surprise, her voice rose again in the second verse, with a touch of plaintiveness that swelled his throat. "We are traveling home to God, in the way our fathers trod. They are happy now, and we soon their happiness shall see." The simple, almost childish words, so childish that they might have been the fitting creation of her own childish lips, here died away with a sweep and crash of the whole strings. Breathless silence followed, in which Stephen Masterton could feel the beatings of his own heart. "Miss Ramirez," he called, in a voice that scarcely seemed his own. There was no reply. "Pepita," he repeated. It was strangely like the accent of a lover, but he no longer cared. Still the singer's voice was silent. Then he ran swiftly beside the wall, as he had seen her run, until he came to the fissure. It was overgrown with vines and brambles, almost as impenetrable as an abatis, but if she had pierced it in her delicate crape dress, so could he. He brushed roughly through and found himself in a glimmering aisle of pear trees close by the white wall of the mission church. For a moment, in that intricate tracing of ebony and ivory made by the rising moon, he was dazzled, but evidently his eruption into the orchard had not been as lithe and silent as her own, for a figure in a parti-colored dress suddenly started into activity, and running from the wall, began to course through the trees until it became apparently a part of that involved pattern. Nothing daunted, however, Stephen Masterton pursued. His speed increased as he recognized the flounces of Pepita's barred dress, but the young girl had the advantage of knowing the locality, and could evade her pursuer by unsuspected turns and doubles. For some moments this fanciful sylvan chase was kept up in perfect silence. It might have been a woodland nymph pursued by a wandering shepherd. Masterton presently saw that she was making toward a tiled roof that was now visible as projecting over the Presidio wall, and was evidently her goal of refuge. He redoubled his speed. With skillful audacity and sheer strength of his broad shoulders, he broke through a dense ceanothus hedge which Pepita was swiftly skirting, and suddenly appeared between her and her house. With her first cry, the young girl turned and tried to bury herself in the hedge. But in another stride the circuit preacher was at her side, and caught her panting figure in his arms. While he had been running, he had swiftly formulated what he should do and what he should say to her. To his simple appeal for her companionship and willing ear, he would add a brotherly tenderness that should invite her trustfulness in him. He would confess his wrong and ask her forgiveness of his abrupt solicitations. He would propose to teach her more hymns. They would practice psalmody together. Even this priest, the custodian of her soul, could not object to that. But chiefly he would thank her. He would tell her how she had pleased him, and this would lead to more serious and thoughtful converse. All this was in his mind while he ran, was upon his lips as he caught her, and for an instant she lapsed, exhausted, in his arms. But alas! Even in that moment he suddenly drew her toward him, and kissed her as only a lover could. The wire grass was already yellowing on the Tasajara plains with the dusty decay of the long, dry summer, when Dr. Duchesne returned to Tasajara. He came to see the wife of Deacon Sanderson, who, having for the 12th time added to the population of the settlement, was not doing as well as everybody, except possibly Dr. Duchesne, expected. After he had made this hollow-eyed, overburdened, undernourished woman as comfortable as he could in her rude, neglected surroundings, to change the dreary chronicle of suffering, he turned to the husband and said, "And what has become of Mr. Masterton, who used to be in your vocation?" A long groan came from the deacon. "Hallo, I hope he has not had a relapse," said the doctor earnestly. "I thought I'd knocked all that nonsense out of him. I beg your pardon. I mean," he added hurriedly, "he wrote to me only a few weeks ago that he was picking up his strength again, and doing well." "In his weak, gross, sinful flesh, yes, no doubt," returned the deacon scornfully, "and perhaps even in a worldly sense, for those who value the vanities of life. But he is lost to us for all time, and lost to eternal life forever. Not," he continued in sanctimonious vindictiveness, "but that I often had my doubts of Brother Masterton's steadfastness. He was too much given to imagery and song." "But what has he done?" persisted Dr. Duchesne. "Done? He has embraced the Scarlet Woman." "Dear me," said the doctor, "so soon? Is it anybody you knew here? Not anybody's wife, eh?" "He has entered the Church of Rome," said the deacon indignantly. "He has forsaken the God of his fathers for the tents of the idolaters. He is the consort of papists, and the slave of the Pope." "But are you sure?" said Dr. Duchesne, with perhaps less concern than before. "Sure," returned the deacon angrily. "Didn't Brother Bulkley, on account of warning reports made by a God-fearing and soul-seeking teamster, make a special pilgrimage to this land of Sodom to inquire and spy out its wickedness? Didn't he find Stephen Masterton steeped in the iniquity of practicing on an organ, he that scorned even a violin or harmonium in the tents of the Lord, in an idolatrous chapel, with a foreign female papist for a teacher? Didn't he find him a guest at the board of a Jesuit priest, visiting the schools of the mission where this young Jezebel of a singer teaches the children to chant in unknown tongues? Didn't he find him living with a wrinkled Indian witch who called him Padroni, and speaking her gibberish? Didn't he find him, who left here a man mortified in flesh and spirit, and pale with striving with sinners, fat and rosy from native wines and flesh-pots, and even vain and gaudy in colored apparel? And last of all, didn't Brother Bulkley hear that a rumor was spread far and wide that this miserable backslider was to take to himself a wife in one of these strange women, that very Jezebel who seduced him? What do you call that?" "It looks a good deal like human nature," said the doctor musingly. "But I call it a cure." End of A Convert of the Mission.